Hey soccer fans, welcome to another episode of the Feed the Fire podcast. I am your host Nick, and tonight we are talking MLS coaches. We're going to start with some developments on the Chicago Fire side of things, and then move into the greater picture of Major League Soccer, because there were a couple announcements over the last day or two, and I'm recording on Friday, November 8th. Get you a little something to hold you over for the playoffs this weekend. But there have been some big announcements, some big names that are coming back into the league and possibly exiting the league, and we're going to talk about all of it tonight. But first, a little housekeeping. If you want to get involved and continue the conversation with me outside of the podcast, find me on social media at Glasshouse Soccer, or you can email me, glasshousesoccer@gmail.com. All right, let's take a look at some of the Chicago Fire news regarding their coaching staff. But we'll start with the Chicago Fire naming Michael Stevens head of recruitment. And this had been speculated and reported that was going to happen, but it is official as of this morning. And per the Chicago Fire website, they have announced that the club has hired Michael Stevens as head of recruitment. A former Fire player and scout, he returns to the organization to lead the club's effort in identifying, recruiting, and acquiring world-class talent. As a member of the sporting leadership team, Stevens will report directly to Director of Football and head coach Greg Berhalter. So there's a little something. We're not sure how the structure of the sporting department is going to build out with Greg Berhalter coming in as this new dual coach and director of sporting role. We know that Frank Lopez is going to be his vice president, and now we are hearing about a sporting leadership team. Now, whether that's just kind of fluff they put in to make it sound like he's part of a group, or there actually is a leadership team structure being built out, that kind of remains to be determined based on some of the other hirings that is going to happen in the future. But at this point, got to take the article at its face value that the Fire sporting side of things are putting together this leadership team, and it has to do with scouting, or there's a large part of it that has to do with scouting. Now here's what Berhalter says about the hire. I'm pleased to welcome Michael back to the club as our head of recruitment. Having worked closely with him at the U.S. men's national team, I've seen firsthand the dedication and attention to detail that he brings to talent recruitment. His deep knowledge of MLS, combined with his experience at the international level, will be a significant asset as we look to build a winning team and establish the Fire as a leader in player recruitment. End quote. Greg Berhalter, using his connections and using his network from when he was coaching with the men's national team to fill out the Fire ranks. And one of the strengths of Greg Berhalter as men's national team coach was his ability to recruit, was his ability to win those dual national battles. Look who we've seen come and play major roles for the United States. And the first two that come to the top of my head are Yunus Musa and Florin Balogun, right? And there are a number of other players too. I'm sorry I can't think of any right now, but that were recruited by Greg Berhalter to come play for the U.S., or at least get cap-tied, or at least come into camp and get some friendlies, rather than play for other countries they may be eligible for. So this is a win for the Chicago Fire. Now let's hear a little bit about the job that Michael Stevens will be doing. In his role as head of recruitment, Stevens will design and execute a talent acquisition strategy that positions the club as a leader in player acquisitions in domestic and international markets, securing top talent that meets both immediate competitive needs and long-term objectives. Stevens will also manage the club's worldwide scouting network, collaborate with the head coach and technical staff to ensure that the recruitment strategy is aligned with the team's needs and playing philosophy, and establish relationships with key stakeholders to enhance recruitment efforts and facilitate negotiations. That's lovely. That's wonderful. I 100% support those efforts, especially in having a uniform style of play, having an identity, and bringing in players that fit that and supplementing that with academy, homegrowns, and local talent. Now we get a quote from the new hire, Michael Stevens. I would like to thank Greg and everyone at the Chicago Fire for this incredible opportunity to work for my hometown club. We will give our all to put a team on the field that the fans can be proud of. And now here's Stevens' background information. Native of Lisle, Illinois, Stevens joins the Fire after spending the past 3 seasons with the technical staff with the LA Galaxy, where he oversaw the identification and evaluation of prospective players. During his tenure with the Galaxy, the club qualified for the playoffs in 2 of 3 seasons, including a highly successful 2024 campaign, which saw the team finish second in the Western Conference and produce its highest regular season point total, 64, since the 2011 campaign. Prior to his time with the Galaxy, Stevens served as the first-team scout for the Fire, from 2018 to 19, before joining the U.S. men's national team as advanced scout from 2019 to 2022. So look at the current Galaxy squad. The guy who helped build that is now in charge of Chicago Fire recruiting. That's encouraging. Now going back to his playing career, Stevens began his professional career when he was selected as the 16th overall pick in the 2010 MLS Super Draft by the LA Galaxy. In 4 seasons with the Galaxy, he won 2 MLS Cups, 2011 and 12, and 2 Supporters' Shields, 2010 and 11, recording 4 goals and 12 assists in 121 matches, 61 starts across all competitions. After featuring for Norwegian side Stabæk, my apologies to the Norwegian language, Stevens spent 2 years with the Fire in 2015-16, recording 6 assists and 37 appearances in 27 starts. Stevens then played his final season as a pro in 2017, helping the San Francisco Deltas win the NASL Championship. So that is who we're getting. Michael Stevens, remember the name, and look forward to some of the exciting signings that he is going to bring to the Chicago Fire. Now, further coaching announcements from the Chicago Fire. This had been speculated. This had kind of been just waiting for this announcement once Greg Berhalter was announced and once we saw Frank Klopas was no longer going to be coaching the team. The Chicago Fire today announced that the club has parted ways with first-team assistant coaches Carlos Garcia and Paulo Nagamura. As I have said on this show before, Frank Klopas being named the interim manager and then the actual head coach for this season, he had to hurry up and kind of slap together a coaching staff. I didn't see any sort of long-term future for this particular staff outside of Zach Thornton. As we know, he's the Fire legend, and goalkeepers, both I guess as coaches and players, are treated just a little bit differently, right? So I hope he does stick around, but we are moving on from these first-team head coaches, and it's nice to see Paulo Nagamura be shown the door. I don't know too much about Carlos Garcia's history, and we'll get into that a little bit in this press announcement, but Nagamura was not a good head coach prior to coming to the Fire, had been moved on from pretty quickly, and you could see just how frustrated he was during some of these games where he's just like, I'd say it was like restless leg syndrome, but it was like restless body syndrome. He was just like shaking on the bench and like gesticulating and gesturing and yelling at players and things. Like, there were some times where he was screaming and yelling more than Frank Klopas was, and maybe I wanted to see a little bit more emotion from Frank, but as the first assistant, take your cues from the head coach. Glad he's no longer part of this organization. Obviously, we saw that he didn't bring much this past season. Now we get to hear from our new director of football, Greg Berhalter, who says, while these were difficult decisions, after careful review, we felt that a fresh start was important as we head into the 25 season. I'd like to sincerely thank Carlos and Paulo for their contributions to the club and wish them the best of their future endeavors. End quote. So now the article talks about Garcia a little bit, who joined the Fire after spending 22 and the 23 season as an assistant coach in Serie A with Udinese Calcio. Since beginning his coaching career in 2017, he has held positions with Maccabi Tel Aviv, Chongqing Nanjing FC, I think that's in China, the Ecuador national team, Shenzhen FC, back to China, Beitar Tel Aviv, Israel. Garcia originally began his career as a professional player in La Liga with RCD Espanyol and spent 16 years playing for various clubs in Spain, Turkey, and Israel. Nagamura joined the Fire after serving as the youngest head coach of the Houston Dynamo in club history. Nagamura originally transitioned to coaching in 2017 after retiring from his playing career. He joined SKC2 as an assistant coach, helped the team win its USL Championship, and then USL Championship Western Conference title. That's it. Won the Western Conference in the USL Championship. Then was named head coach in 2018. Took SKC2 to the semifinals, to the conference semifinals, and that was after a 12-year playing career where he had 252 regular season appearances in MLS, 3 U.S. Open Cup titles, and 2 MLS Cups. So unfortunately, all that playing experience and that success at the USL level did not translate to the head coaching level. Now, to be fair, as poorly as he did coaching the Houston Dynamo, there is an argument to be made that he was shown the door because there was new management coming in, and no matter who the coach was, was going to be let go, but the fact that he had performed so poorly, I guess, just made it easier. So a couple things to keep in mind there. Greg Berhalter is going to be searching for some new assistant coaches for the first team, and we've got a few names that we're going to talk about in the second half of the show. But before we get into that, real quick, another MLS announcement, another individual player award, and I kind of like how they stagger these out, like one every day or every other day for the leading through the playoffs here, so we can kind of get excited for it, keep an eye out and watch for it. Though it might be nice to have like a little award ceremony or something. But they announced the Young Player of the Year, and that is RSL's Diego Luna. He is a 21-year-old midfielder from Salt Lake. He had 20 goal contributions, which were the second most for Salt Lake, who ended up finishing third in the Western Conference, if I recall correctly. 8 goals and 12 assists got them to help them get to the CONCACAF Champions Cup again. He's borderline U.S. Olympic team, possibly men's national team conversation in the next couple of years. So he's definitely gone from a bench player, bit player, to now an integral part of RSL's success. Unfortunately, couldn't get it done in the first round of the playoffs. A little bit of extra news on this award for Diego Luna. It says that he is the second player in league history to record 20 goal contributions in a single season prior to turning 21 years old. The only other player to do that, Diego Rossi, who had 12 goals and 9 assists in 2018. Now, as we know, the voting for these individual year-end awards is broken down into 3 groups of voters: the players, the media, and the clubs. And by the clubs, certain technical staff, coaching staff, and whatnot. Diego Luna won the player vote and the media vote, 33% and 52%. But the club staff actually voted for Diego Gomez of Miami at a whopping 53%. And then the third place winner, Christian Oliveira of LAFC, only ended up with a grand total of about 5.5% of the vote. So it really came down to Diego Luna and Diego Gomez. Luna beat Gomez out on the aggregate percentage of these 3 groups just by about 2.45%. But when the media is split with the club here, that's kind of an odd split to me. Diego Luna got half the media vote at 52%, and Diego Gomez gets half the club vote at 53%. So I wonder what that means. And the players favored Diego Luna, so I think that would probably suggest more that Diego Luna is obviously the most deserving to get this. And is Diego Gomez a product of being around all the stars in Miami down there? Possibly. But as a young player and someone who's played such a role in scoring goals, I think that is why a lot of the club technical staff voted for him, whereas a lot of the players and media voted for Luna because they see how valuable he is. Yeah, the goals and assists, but everything else that he does for that team. Now, he does join a few other big names here, so we got to keep an eye on his future. The last 5 Young Player of the Year award winners: Thiago Almada, Atlanta; Jesus Ferreira, Dallas; Ricardo Pepi, Dallas; Diego Rossi, LAFC, now Columbus, after a stint in Turkey, I believe; and Andre Shinashiki. Actually, what happened to Andre Shinashiki? He was the Rookie of the Year in 2019 with the Colorado Rapids, and I'm just curious as to where he ended up and what he did. So after the Rapids, he did spend that season in Charlotte, the 2022-2023 seasons, and is now playing with Nefsi Peshikar Futbol Klubu in Azerbaijan. He is in Azerbaijan. Imagine that. That's quite the trip. And yeah, a little bit of bar trivia here for you all as well. The Young Player of the Year award started off as the Rookie of the Year award, and from 1996 to 2019 it was the Rookie of the Year, but now they are calling them Young Player of the Year starting since 2020. So change a little bit of the scope of it, but that is essentially it. All right, we're going to take a quick water break, and then we're going to get into all the coaching discussion. And I'm going to remind you here that our water break is sponsored by Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear, Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best. And Skira Icelandic Spring Water is available at your local 7-Eleven. Thank you to Skira. Thank you for being a part of the show from the beginning, and now the show will continue with the MLS coaching carousel. There was a great article on MLSsoccer.com that outlined all the coaching changes this year. The article came out yesterday, Thursday, November 7th, so there may be a couple updates that we're going to talk about from today, Friday the 8th. But as the big one, the big news here, Jim Curtin has been released by the Philadelphia Union after failing to make the playoffs for the first time since 2017. He was the two-time Coach of the Year, took over in 2014, won the Supporter Shield in 2020, got to the MLS Cup Final in 2022, and was the second longest tenured coach behind Peter Vermes in MLS. What's interesting is if you look back to some of the earlier years of Jim Curtin coaching, when Ernst Tanner became the general manager of the Union, Curtin wasn't his guy, wasn't his coach, but I don't know if he just didn't have someone lined up or Curtin was too popular for him to immediately come in and fire. So Curtin, like for 3 seasons, was on one-year deals and just kept winning and kept developing players and selling them and then getting new academy players to come up and play well in the MLS and make the playoffs again. And Philadelphia at home had one of the best records of any MLS team over the last 5 years or so. I forget what the numbers are, but it was near impossible to go to Philadelphia and win a game. Possibly sneak away with a draw, but near impossible to go to Philly to win a game up until this season. So it was really, really difficult for Ernst Tanner as the GM to fire Jim Curtin for all these reasons. So he had him on like these 3 or 4 one-year deals, prove-it deals, and Curtin kept proving it and eventually got a little bit of a longer deal. I forget what was the arrangement for his current deal, but when you lose and when the GM kind of has been wanting to get rid of you for a while and take the team possibly in a different direction, this is what's going to happen. So Jim Curtin is out as the Philadelphia Union head coach. Now, the quote here from Ernst Tanner is, "We want to extend a heartfelt appreciation to Jim for his passion and dedication to this club over the last 10 years. He greatly contributed to the success of the club, has achieved in recent years, and for that we're extremely grateful." So, Jim Curtin, I don't want to make it look like I'm putting all the blame on Ernst Tanner like he had a vendetta out there. Curtin had been there for 10 years, and some of the other discussion around his firing is that the club has gotten stale. It's the same voice, been there for 10 years, despite the youth development, despite the solid success, despite being at home, or having such a great home record, and being just a good guy. Like, Jim Curtin is very well liked all around MLS. But when you start to see the drop-off in results, and when you have kind of a stagnant time with the Union, and a lot of people were thinking Curtin was going to get fired 2, 3, 4 years ago because he just couldn't get him to win that trophy, right? And then he ended up winning the Supporter Shield, and they're like, okay, maybe we stick him around for a couple more years or so. But that was also another knock against Jim Curtin, is he could never win the trophy. They were always kind of in the mix for one, but could never win it. So now where does Jim Curtin go? At this point, everything is open for speculation. It's only been a day since this was announced. I'm sure he's going to get calls from other MLS teams, and think about this list that we're going to run through of teams who are in need of new head coaches. If you think he'd be a fit anywhere there. Or here's like my pipe dream for Jim Curtin. Greg Berhalter calls him up and says, why don't you come and be my first assistant for 1 or 2 years, and then I will give you, a 4-year deal with the Chicago Fire as our head coach while I transition into the director of sporting for the club. That would be an amazing thing for me to see. I would love to have Berhalter and Curtin working together on the sideline of the Chicago Fire and then turning the reins over to Jim Curtin. I think it's a pipe dream. I think as someone in my group chat pointed out, that would make Jim Curtin the most expensive assistant coach in history and probably ever, if you're going to get someone of his talents to come in and be a first assistant. But the fact of the matter remains, if there is a long-term plan for him to move up, then it's possible he bites at it. But the counterpoint, speaking of long-term plans to move up, does Jim Curtin want to continue to be a head coach in MLS? Does he want to attempt to coach in a different league, challenge himself that way? Or does he like being in the United States? Does he want to get into an executive role? Some people are speculating that he is going to want the Greg Berhalter treatment, or the Peter Vermes treatment, or the Bruce Arena treatment, foreshadowing there, what we're going to talk about in a minute. Is he going to want to be in an executive role with maybe coaching responsibilities or move into an executive role? All that remains to be seen, so keep a lookout for things all over social media, and anything that I hear, I'll make sure to put it in the show. So the Union are the first coach in chronological order here to go. We're going back here, according to this article. The next one, we already know about the Chicago Fire, bringing in Greg Berhalter with Frank Lopez stepping down, so we don't have to talk about that. Another potential head coach, assistant coach for the future for the Chicago Fire, Austin FC's former coach, Josh Wolf, as he was let go as of October 6th, and Nico Estevez was brought in later that month. So Wolf had been in charge of Austin FC since their inaugural season, their expansion season in 2021. He ended up with 45 wins, 60 losses, and 30 draws, but their best finish was the 2022 Western Conference Finals. So Nico Estevez comes in after being let go from FC Dallas just this season as well. So there's a little change there, but we know Josh Wolf has got the history with the Fire. He's got some connections with Greg Berhalter, so it's possible the same type of thing could be said. Bring him in as an assistant coach, let him work under Berhalter and build a vision, build a roster, and then in a couple years he can take it over and Berhalter can transition into that front office role. That's what I would. And when I say Berhalter would coach for a couple years and transition solely to that front office role, that's what's in my head. I haven't heard any sort of reporting on that, and maybe Greg Berhalter wants to stay as a head coach and director of sporting for the next 10 years. Maybe that's what he wants. Maybe he really does want the Vermes model. That I don't know. I know he misses coaching at the club level. He's made comments about that when he was with the USMNT. So I hope that he can kind of scratch that itch for a couple seasons with the Fire and then transition solely to the director of sporting, because in my opinion, in the modern game, in this league, and with everything going on, not only in MLS and CONCACAF, but on a global level, it's just too much for one man to do. Unless he delegates. But if you're delegating, why not also delegate the head coaching role, right? Is Joe Mansueto going to want Greg Berhalter to stay in this role and continue to delegate, or is he going to want a clear chain of command? We already saw he's going to have Michael Stevens be the head of their global recruiting network. So who else is going to come in and have some other sort of head type of positions, director type of positions, VP positions, right, underneath Greg Berhalter? Now, St. Louis also is in the middle of a coaching change. They let go of Bradley Carnell back on July 1st. Their interim coach was John Hackworth, and they have not made a decision on who is coming in. They had a great expansion season in 2023, finishing first in the West, and then this season they finished 12th in the Western Conference. So I guess it's easier to be an expansion team and find success than it is to sustain it. And St. Louis, as we know, started putting together their roster a year before, if not more, before their first official match. So they had a lot of time to get things in place, to coach up the players, to kind of gel a little bit, kind of see the lay of the land. So that definitely helped them in their first season, and now not the direction that they want to go in moving forward. We'll see who ends up there. Next up, San Jose got rid of Luchi Gonzalez on June 24th, and Ian Russell had been their interim coach. But as we recently have heard, they have hired a new head coach. Bruce Arena is back in MLS, taking over the San Jose Earthquakes. He is the winningest coach in MLS history. He is getting the dual title treatment. He will be head coach and sporting director for San Jose, and as you may recall, he has coached DC United from 96 to 98, the Red Bulls from 06 to 07, the Galaxy from 2008 to 2016, and most recently the New England Revolution from 2019 to 2023, with a couple stints as the USMNT head coach as well. Now, the underlying story here is, as we know, he got let go from New England due to, I forget what the official term was, but it was essentially an HR issue, that there was a hostile work environment that he was overseeing or contributing to or a part of, or things like that. So we never really were told what had happened in that locker room that one of the players brought up, which led to the dismissal of other office and coaching members, as well as Bruce Arena. He actually had to get reinstated by MLS before he could accept this position, and we don't know the specifics of it. However, there was an interview with him, I think it was over on The Athletic, where he got asked about it, like, what happened? The only thing he said was there was a lot of guys in the locker room making jokes or joking around. Things were said. And that was it. So I guess the locker room talk went a little too far and got a little too serious, and that's what ended up leading to the investigation and his dismissal from MLS. So that is the story there. And San Jose, though, is going to be an interesting club to watch going forward. And here's what MLS Soccer's write-up about that says. In 2024, the Quakes conceded an MLS record 78 goals and finished bottom of the overall league standings. They were conceding more than 2 goals a game, right? 78 divided by 34 is 2 remainder something. So that is a lot of goals that they were giving up. Only 6 wins and 3 draws. 25 losses on 21-point finish. The club parted ways with Luchi Gonzalez and was led by interim Ian Russell. The last time the Quakes qualified for the postseason was 2023. They've missed the playoffs in all but 3 seasons since 2013. Well, at least they can say that. I think that's even better than the Chicago Fire as far as making the playoffs go. They have 3 DPs on their roster: Christian Espinoza, Hernan Lopez, and Carlos Grueso. Other key players: Amal Pellegrino, Daniel, and Rodriguez. But again, these are their core, and they are not anywhere near all-star level or top 11 level or top of the leaderboard in any statistical categories here. You know, their DPs are not producing like DPs, and I wonder if they're going to end up buying some of these guys out and trying to turn over the roster, maybe go to the 2 DP 4U22 extra $2 million in GAM route in order to see what they got and kind of let Arena reset the roster and the culture. If they have some success and he sticks around for 5 years or so, I don't know what his contract is, it hasn't been released, but you know, you get 4 or 5 years, maybe he's turning them into a competitive team that could win something. But I see this more as, why don't we bring him in? He's a safe hire. It's from a coaching standpoint, maybe not from a locker room talk standpoint, but he's a safe hire from the coaching standpoint. He's going to change the culture, he's going to reset things, and then in another 3-4 years we'll bring someone else in, and then we can start spending money and really going after it. So that, I wonder if that's going to be their direction there. So that's the update coming out of California. Also, we saw Nico Estevez released from Dallas after a just subpar start to the season. They were supposed to be top of the West this year, or at least fighting for that one of those top 4 spots, and they ended up with 3 wins, finishing 13th in the Western Conference, carrying a 5-match winless streak. Bum, bum, bum. So, Nico Estevez, a former U.S. men's national team assistant, they note in the article, ended up going about 500. 28 wins, 27 losses, 28 draws. Yeah, I don't think you can get more 500 than that in 2.5 seasons in Dallas. Unfortunately, though, the success was early on and could not be sustained. Another interesting coaching decision that's going to be coming up is Atlanta United. They parted ways with Gonzalo Pineda on June 3rd. Rob Valentino has been their interim, and maybe they didn't play great June, July, August, but they have rallied in October. I forget how many games they won in a row at the end of the season to get the wild card spot, and then win the wild card game. And now they're taking Miami to the game 3 in the first round playoff series here. So a lot of people are speculating that Rob Valentino is going to be the front runner for the head coaching job. Now, does success as your interim mean you're going to have success as a head coach? I don't think there's any correlation between the two. It's a completely different type of animal here. The head coach has got to be involved in roster construction. An interim is just trying to get the best out of his players. He can play the we're the underdog and, this is what our season comes down to here. Leave it all out on the line. Nobody knows where you're going to be next season. But if he becomes the head coach, a lot of those storylines, a lot of those motivational techniques go away. And we have seen difficulty in interims becoming head coaches, and we saw what Vanni Sartini did a couple years back, and how he's now struggled as a head coach despite his current success in the playoffs right now, getting to LAFC to a game 3. So it's going to be difficult. We'll see what Atlanta does. Now, the tie-in with Jim Curtin in Atlanta was Curtin turned down an interview with the Atlanta United organization. Some people say, well, he didn't know he was going to get fired and he was going to stick around in Philly. I don't think that this came as a surprise to Jim Curtin, that it just came out of the blue that they're going to let him go. I'm sure there were conversations. So the question is, does he contact Atlanta United again and say, you know what, on second thought, let's interview? Now, if I'm Atlanta United, I'm like, no, I'm not going to take you back now. This is not bad breakup. We're going to get back together kind of a thing. You already turned us down. It's clear we were not a priority for you, so we don't want you. Bye-bye. That's, if I'm Atlanta United, I would not entertain Jim Curtin after he turned you down the first time. But there are a lot of fans and a lot of speculation out there that think he may go interview. And you know what? If he does, worst case scenario, he kind of gets some practice in and gets to see how other organizations do some business. Best case scenario, it all ends up working out and he gets an offer and can use that to drive up his demands on other clubs that he may want to go coach with. And real quick, to end the season, Atlanta went on they won their final 2 games of the season in order to get into that wild card spot. Nashville SC is the last team that has made a coaching change. They let go of Gary Smith back on May 16th. Rumba Muntali was their interim coach, but they ended up hiring back on July 3rd BJ Callahan, former U.S. assistant to Greg Berhalter. So I think that'll be fun to see when Nashville plays Chicago. Berhalter versus Callahan a little bit, see how those two interact, and maybe they know their tendencies a little bit better than other coaches would, and could be an interesting checkers match. We'll see what the rosters look like for both of those teams too. But it says that even though Gary Smith was Nashville's only head coach since they joined the league in 2020, he got them to 4 straight MLS Cup Playoffs and the 2023 Leagues Cup Final. Things weren't going their way this season. Needed some turnover, needed a fresh voice, needed to utilize a little bit more, needed to do a little bit more tactically. And that's where I think BJ Callahan is going to come in. Now, it's hard to say Gary Smith wasn't a good tactician when everything had to go through Hani Mukhtar and it was just counterattack and Hani, counterattack and Hani. And you saw when Schaffelberg came in, he gave them a big bump out on the wing. So maybe if there was a little bit of a better roster construction, and I don't know how influential he was in it, maybe he sees a little bit more success with Nashville SC, and maybe he's not fired right now. But as the situation stands, it's BJ Callahan leading Nashville SC in 2025. And with that, we're going to wrap our show. I hope you enjoy all the MLS Cup playoffs this weekend. Tonight, late game, Vancouver LAFC, and then tomorrow, Saturday, you can just sit your butt and watch 6 straight hours of soccer, and that's something I absolutely plan to do as soon as I get the yard work done in the morning. It's a good thing I got a couple sons here who will be forced into helping me rake the leaves and put away all the patio furniture before winter really hits. Thank you to everyone for listening. Like, subscribe, rate, review, share the show, grow the conversation, and as always, let's go Fire.